Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video, and today guys, before we get into the video, I would like to say a huge thank you to Bar van Melkerbeck, I mean that is a fantastic name, for sending in some awesome pictures of his Imperial Guard forces. I love the colour scheme that you've done on these guys. They look really cool, and the mixture of like the orange and the blue and then the head conversions. You've got the guys with the bear skin hats, the guys with the kilts, and then the swampy look on the bases. It all just looks absolutely fantastic. So thank you for sending these pictures in, Bart. You've done the Emperor proud with these minis. If anyone else has got any cool pictures they want me to use in my videos, then please head on over to my Facebook page and post them there, and there'll be a link to that Facebook page down in the description below. Without further ado, let's crack on with today's video. So today's video is going to be a quick tip tactica, a quick re-review of the Leman Russ Eradicator and its Eradicator Nova Cannon. Now this is a particular variant of the Leman Russ that you really don't see on the tabletop very often, and it's a real shame because it's super cool. It's basically like a miniature version of like a Nova Cannon that one of the super heavies uses, that they mount on the battleships of the Imperium. And essentially one day a tech priest was like, you know, we've just got so much nuclear waste hanging around here, we should really put it to use. You know what, let's make a Leman Russ variant that can just launch it at people. And so it's really cool as a tank variant, and it's like a specialist demolisher cannon in a funny sort of way. It's a bit longer range but a bit less powerful, but it's got a similar style turret and all this kind of stuff. It looks really cool. It's got like a boxy turret, boxy barrel I should say, and it's actually always been a bit of a favourite of mine, although I rarely have had a chance to use it in 8th and 9th edition. I used it loads in 7th, and that was because it was a cheap way of supporting your tank commanders, because back in the day you used to have to take squadrons of tank commanders, and it was a tank commander on one support tank essentially. Really cool concept which they don't do anymore unfortunately. But yeah, that's when I used to use it, and then I've used it on and off in 8th edition, and I tried it sort of once in 9th edition, but it's always been a tank that has struggled to find its role, because it's meant to be a specialist vehicle, but it's not really. There always seems to be something that can do its job better. Now, in 9th edition and 8th edition, it has the current stats, which is it's got a 36-inch range, D6 shots, but with grinding advance that becomes 2d6, which if you don't move half, and well, you never move half, right? And then it's got strength 6, AP 2, damage D3, and it ignores cover. So if you compare it to like a battle cannon and a demolisher cannon, some sort of two of the other more common sort of varieties of Leman Russ, the battle cannon obviously has better strength and better range, but the AP on the Eradicator is kind of better because it ignores cover. That's kind of the big with it. You know, it drops 2 points of strength, retains the same AP, retains the same damage, but it gets that lovely ignore cover. And this is actually a really big deal in 9th edition, because if you've seen any of the tables that I've played on, any of the Shark Tank sort of battle reports that I've done and after action reports, there is so much terrain in 9th edition these days. One of the criticisms I've had of certain events has been really well managed and all this kind of stuff, but the terrain was rubbish and it totally skewed the event. Because some people knew what the terrain was going to be like ahead of time, and so almost like tailored to the terrain. It was kind of crazy. So the Eradicator is really useful in the vast majority of tournaments that you're going to go to, where you're going to see a huge amount of terrain. It ignores cover, which is absolutely fantastic. If you compare it to the Demolisher Cannon, obviously again it has less strength, and it has less damage, and it has less AP. But, you know, in fact, it almost has equal AP to the Demolisher Cannon, because obviously the Demolisher Cannon is AP 3, but the Eradicator is AP 2, but ignoring cover. So it kind of balances out when you talk about shooting things in cover. The advantage is that this thing has a 36-inch range over Demolisher's 24-inch range. Now, obviously, the Demolisher is a really good variant. It's a really powerful variant, and I wouldn't ever argue that this thing is better than a Demolisher, or, you know, I think it's potentially better than a battle cannon, but I wouldn't necessarily argue it's better than Demolisher. Demolishers have only one weakness, which is a 24-inch range, and there are ways of mitigating that, because, you know, you've got things like gunnery experts and spot details and that kind of stuff. So Demolisher, and you know, you can also go full. If you're Cadian, you can go full distance and then spend 2 CP on shock troops, and you still count stationary and all that kind of stuff. So Demolisher cannons have one weakness, but there are kind of ways to work around it. However, Demolisher cannons, I have found in recent experience, tend to move out, shoot something, and then die. Whereas the Eradicator, and one of the things that I've had great success with is having a couple of battle cannon, especially with like Gatekeeper as the Cadians, having a couple of battle cannons at the back that are able to shoot a bit longer range, provide a bit more long range fire support. And I feel like the Eradicator would be a good stand-in for one of those battle cannons. So for example, if I'm looking at taking, of course I'm going to take one of my Leman Russes with Gatekeeper, that's fine. And then I might have a couple of Demolisher Cannon tank commanders as well. But then I've got Pask. If I'm running Cadian, I've got Pask left over. Or if I'm Destroying, I've got that 4th Leman Russ that I want to take and slap on the extra +1 to hit from Firstborn Pride, right? There's that. You can always run 4 tank commanders in a guard army if you go looking hard enough. And, well, you know, one of them's like a pseudo tank commander, you guys know what I mean. But if I'm running Pask, for example, who's already a pretty pricey boy, slapping on an Eradicator cannon isn't a bad choice at all. Because Pask with a battle cannon I've used quite extensively, and the damage D3 is okay, but that AP -2 is where he really struggles. And more often than not, I end up finding myself having to use maybe like shock troops on the battle cannon and trying to get into like half range with it to get the extra AP. You know, I have fiddled around with putting Weapon Expert on Gatekeeper to try and get through with that extra, you know, AP again on, you know, because Gatekeeper's good, but it's only AP2. And so what I've really found is the lack of AP is really difficult. And the reason the lack of AP is really difficult is because of cover. Now, this is obviously this is kind of where I'm going to end the comparison between the Eradicator cannon and Demolisher and the battle cannon, okay? Because these are things that are sort of true for 9th edition, but now we're going to move into specifically what of sort of more recent history. We're going to take a look at Armour of Contempt. So this is what really kills off the battle cannon for me. This is what has kind of sealed the fate of the battle cannon in my eyes, which is where Demolisher cannon is always my primary choice. Battle cannon used to be my primary choice, but I don't think it is anymore. And the reason for that is Armour of Contempt and the amount of cover. Because it used to be okay that there was a lot of cover, because the battle cannon would still be knocking a Marine in cover onto a 4-up save. That was fine. You know, it goes from a 2-up, AP2, 4-up, great. But now they're going to be on a 3-up. And that's really annoying. Whereas if you take the Eradicator, it's still going to be on a 4-up. So for me, I think the Eradicator is actually better now than the battle cannon as a tertiary choice. If you had to sort of, you know, if you had to make me say how would I line my tanks up now, I'd have, if I was running Cadians, I'd probably consider taking 1 tank commander with Gatekeeper, 2 tank commanders with Demolisher cannons, and then that last one, Pask, I probably wouldn't give him a battle cannon anymore. And I'd probably consider giving him an Eradicator Nova Cannon. So that's kind of where I'm thinking, and it's Armour of Contempt has really done the dirty on the battle cannon. Now, there's one other thing to mention though. The Eradicator's great, but it does unfortunately have a really powerful rival. And that is the Executioner Plasma Cannon, which is basically the same points, but is always AP3 and is an extra pip of strength. The Executioner Plasma Cannon, just to be clear, is strength 7, it's AP3, it's damage 1, but it's a number of shots D6 like the Eradicator. So if you compare it to the Eradicator Nova Cannon, you're looking at an extra pip of strength for the Plasma Cannon, extra pip of AP, but the damage is damage 1 rather than damage D3. Now the Eradicator, that damage 1 you could argue is a big deal, but you then can take into account that you can overcharge the Executioner Plasma Cannon. So suddenly it becomes strength 8. Suddenly it becomes damage 2. And that's when it starts getting interesting. Especially again in this sort of modern world that we find ourselves in. Because then really the Executioner Plasma Cannon, in my opinion, overshadows it again. And this links back to what I was saying at the very beginning of the video. The Eradicator Nova Cannon has never quite fit. There's always been something which has been slightly better. And if you had to twist my arm, if you had to put a gun to my head, whatever it's saying you want to use, and make me pick, I'd probably pick the Executioner Plasma Cannon. Because it's always going to be at least a bit stronger. The strength 8 is a big deal, because you've got a lot of toughness 4 infantry. You know, Marines are having a bit of a resurgence at the moment. They can obviously transhuman one of those squads, but not every single squad can be transhuman, so that strength 8 is going to make a difference. And the transhuman affects the Eradicator Nova Cannon as well, don't forget. The extra AP is going to be useful against not just armour of contempt armies, but all sorts of armies. The extra AP is going to be helpful. And the ability to have consistent damage. You know, if you are fighting a target where your extra damage isn't going to matter, you just don't overcharge your plasma cannon. You just don't do it. Now, the one advantage that the Eradicator maintains, the Nova Cannon maintains, is the damage D3 has the potential to be 3 damage. That is, it has a possibility of being 3 damage. And in a world where you see a lot of reduced damage by 1, that is a small advantage. Do I think it's enough to make a difference? No. I don't think so. In fact, weirdly, you're starting to see a bit less reduced damage by 1. Well, that's not strictly true. It's just kind of shifting. So people aren't taking as many dreadnoughts as you see anymore. There's obviously certain lists that are totally built around that will still turn up. But people aren't taking as many dreadnoughts as much. But then Death Guard are struggling, but they're kind of having a resurgence with like Terminator lists and stuff like that. I still think you're better off. You know, if you had to send me into a Terminator Death Guard list with either an Eradicator Nova Cannon or an Executioner Plasma Cannon, I'm taking the Executioner Plasma Cannon. And this is the last reason why. Because there are other sources of ignore cover in the Guard book. Grey Knights are still around, Thousand Sons are still around, but their prevalence is no longer so much that you can just exclude all Psychers from your list. You kind of have to. You're not guaranteed to face them. When they were first in Ascendance, those two factions were pretty much, you had to remove Psychers from your list. Because you were pretty much guaranteed to face them at an event. And you were pretty much guaranteed that if you had a Psyker, you'd be starting 15 points down, because they would have they both got a secondary that really takes advantage of the fact that they out-Psyker everyone if the enemy's got a Psyker. But that's not such a big thing anymore. So then you start thinking, well, if I can bring Psykers again, I can bring Astropaths again. If I can bring Astropaths again, I can take advantage of Astral Divination. Astral Divination has an 18-inch range. It's not super long range, but then again, the Execution Plasma Cannon only has a 36-inch range. Also, it hasn't got Ignore Line of Sight, so more often than not, surprisingly, you're probably going to have to get a little up close and personal so that it can peek around corners and blast on people that are trying to hide. You're just going to have to screen it fairly well, but you can imagine if you're running one of these things, you've got a screen of white shields or conscripts or infantry, you've got your Astropath, and then you've got your tank. You can, and the Astropath can be, it's all units within 6 inches of the Astropath, so the Astropath might have to be 18 inches away, but the tank can be 24 inches away. So it gives it a little bit more extra range. So that would be my recommendation. I think the Eradicator isn't a bad choice. I think if you don't have an Execution Plasma Cannon, but you've got an Eradicator and you want to swap out one of your battle cannons, like I say, if you're taking Pask, swap out Pask's battle cannon for a Nova Cannon, that's fine. But if you've got the Plasma, I'd stick the Plasma on for certain. We're definitely entering into the good old days of go big or go home. Big AP or 0 AP, but you either overwhelm with massive amounts of AP, nothing shots, or you punch through with every hit being if it hits, it's going to hurt. And I think the plasma cannon, the execution plasma cannon, fits that really nicely. So there we go, guys. That's my video for today. I hope you've liked it. If you have enjoyed today's video, please consider heading on over and becoming a channel Patreon. This channel lives and dies on Patreon support. And it's I'm just hugely grateful to all the Patreons that I currently have for the channel. Honestly, you guys make a huge, huge difference. A bigger difference than you could ever possibly know. But I just want to say a massive thank you to all the current Patrons. And if you aren't interested in becoming one, please check out the link in the description below. Without further ado, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. And of course, I'll see you guys next time.